Hello everybody, welcome back to X-Plane 11. My name is Micah, and I'm going to do this short video here, just kind of cover a couple things about coming in and landing with the Boeing 737. Now, of course, this can apply to a multitude of aircraft, mostly airliners, but I've had some people ask me specifically, how do I keep my aircraft on center line on approach, and how do I get such good landings? So I'm just going to be upfront and honest that I don't always get good landings, and I don't always land center line. I do have often, go slightly off center line left and right. In general, I do usually stay pretty close to center line. My landings are not always good, as you've seen in some streams. So you're never always gonna hit a perfect landing. You're never always gonna hit a perfect center line. But what can you do to bring yourself as close to perfect as possible? Well, simple answer is practice, right? So there's the old saying that practice makes perfect, but then there's been the revised saying, which I agree with more, which is good practice makes perfect. And what that means basically is that practice in a good manner. So you're not just screwing around, you're not just flying around having fun, be like, oh, I'm going to try to land with no engines. Like, that's not going to help you in getting better at your landings. Good practice is where you continually do the same approach, like for example, over and over again, like into Atlanta, say landing at 27 right, which is what we're going to lead landing today at. Keep hitting that approach. Just keep hitting it until I'm nailing it perfect every single time. Once I've got that approach, switch up the approach. See how I do on the other approach. Do that until I get that one perfect. That's what I've done, and that's what really helped improve me, and that's just repetition of something that you already know. You already know what you're going to need to do at certain areas, at certain distances, at certain altitudes, speeds, etc. That's really going to help you hone in on getting that perfect landing. And a perfect landing doesn't start when you're on final, okay? It starts before you descend. You go through that briefing process. You check out your star. You check out your approach. Are you doing ILS? Are you doing RNAV? What's your go around altitude? What's your go around procedures? What's the procedures on your specific approach? Is there anything you need to note about that approach? Any speed restrictions, altitude restrictions, anything like that? Sometimes it's based on aircraft too. You'll have restrictions based on aircraft. You need to make sure you're paying attention to those things. Practicing this stuff in advance, really paying attention to those charts way before you descend, is really going to help you on an approach, even an unfamiliar approach. You'll actually, if you go through those steps, knowing what your next waypoints are, knowing what altitude you need to be at those waypoints, you memorize that in your head. That's going to help you a lot, so you're not constantly having to reference charts as you're coming in, or your FMC or anything like that. So definitely do a good pre-descent briefing on your approach phase and everything like that. So we are about to be turning on to our final approach here, actually, into Atlanta here. So a good landing starts all the way back up on top of the descent. Even before that, you can get the whole flight plan. Make sure your flight plan's good, when you're doing your startup sequence, and get everything programmed in. So a good landing starts way before you even get to that approach phase. But a good approach will generally lead to a good landing. If you have a really good approach, a lot of times you'll have a really good landing. That's obviously not set in stone, but a lot of times that will help a lot, having that good approach. Okay, so we are going to be doing an ILS approach, but I'm going to disengage the ILS, the autopilot and everything, way before I even get to that point. I'm not going to get all the way. Oops. I say that and I literally just hit the button. I didn't mean to do that. I hit it with my hand on the yoke. Anyway, I'm going to disengage the autopilot way before I even get to that point, and that's because I want to show you that you can land this in a manual fashion. A lot of times I'll see people who are new, bring the ILS in all the way to the minimums, which is, yes, you can absolutely do that. But on a beautiful day like this, there is no reason to do that. Fly a visual approach. Fly the aircraft manually. The only way to get better at flying is to actually fly. A computer is not you flying. Okay, so you actually need to fly the aircraft you're trying to learn, trying to get better at. So the only way you're going to do that is if you take it off autopilot. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. Yeah, I'm about 15 miles away from the airport here. I'm going to drop flaps 1 here as we come in. I'm seeing I'm getting the frequency that I need for my LS. I can verify it's down here in the FMS as well. And measure with the Airbus, it's essential. With the Boeing, it's not quite as difficult to do, but managing that speed is also essential on your approach. Making sure that your speed is not too fast. Again, the slower you come in, the better the landing is going to be, because, and it's not always the case. I say that on your approach, being within those tolerances, within those speeds that you need to be at, are going to really help you make a better approach. If you're coming in too fast and you go in and you do your flare at the end, they're just going to float, and you're just going to float down the runway. So it's really helpful to oh, look, Stone Mountain. Anyway, really helpful for you to actually make sure you're flying those speeds, the speeds you need to be flying at. So we're approaching our final approach fix here of Mercer. Go drop flaps 2 now. As I get to Mercer, I'm going to drop flaps 5. Now, obviously, you'd be communicating with ATC at this point. They'd be telling you, switching over to the tower from approach, etc. Doing a lot of things. And for those who are not, used to flying an aircraft, so to speak, or a specific aircraft, trying to deal with ATC at the same time you're trying to fly the aircraft you're unfamiliar with is very, very difficult, and it's just very difficult, hard to do. Make sure you're practicing with the aircraft before you're going on VATSIM, before you're flying it, because you're going to look like a fool, which I have done before. You saw it actually in the last live video I did. I flew the Embraer 175, and I don't really know the aircraft very well, and the last entire approach, basically, I had to fly that thing manually because the autopilot went haywire and I didn't know how to fix it. So, knowing your systems are important. Alright, so I'm going to be landing on 27 right, which is right there. You see that? See the pappy lights right there. So what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to go ahead and take it off autopilot here. Now I'm going to fly this manually. Now I am flying the lines here, the guides, the flight directors. I'm still flying that. I'm going to do approach here. And all I'm going to do is follow these on in. Now, once I get to a certain area, I'll actually switch over to where I'm just looking outside. Don't get stuck on the instruments themselves too much. Glance at them, keep them in the reference, obviously, but don't get stuck down here. Look outside. If you can see the runway, you're good. You can run a visual approach. Don't be afraid to look outside the window. That's where you need to be looking most of the time. This is just a reference, okay? I'm gonna go flaps 10 now. Again, watching that speed. My final approach speed should be 131, okay? So at 15, it'll be 138, so I can go and drop this down to 138. That's my next step here. A little high, so down just a little bit. All right, 5 miles out, I'm gonna drop my landing gear and go flaps 15. This approach altitude is 3,000. Set that. Now, a good thing to keep in mind, so I'm going to switch out. I'm not even going to look at this anymore. I'm going to look outside the window, okay? I'm going to set my speed down to 131 and go flaps 30 here. My final flaps for my approach. All I'm going to do is keep that runway looking down the runway as like a line, okay? I'm going to keep that straight as possible. going to use the Pappy lights as a reference here to make sure I'm staying on the glide slope, okay? Looking for 2 white and 2 red. That tells me that I am good to go. If I see 3 white, it means I'm too high. If I see 3 red, it means I'm too low. Don't be afraid to fly a little bit too low as long as you're able to in a glide slope. Might give the, if there's the ground's flat, don't be afraid to fly a little bit low. That's going to help you, but don't fly too low. Obviously, you really want to be right there at the 2 white and 2 red. That's your best option. So again, I am flying just visually. I'm not using any instruments or anything right now. I'm just using my eyes to look down the runway, looking down the runway, looking at where I'm going to be landing. I want to touch down right there in that black spot, okay? That's where I want to touch. Letting auto throttle keep me at the correct throttle here. Bringing my aircraft down nice and easy. Making sure I'm staying on that glide slope. Keeping that runway as straight as I can. I don't want it skirting off to the right. I don't want it going off to the left. Looking at where my aircraft is in reference to the ground. Looking where I am in reference to the runway. Okay, so I'm a little bit low. See that with the Pappy lights, so I can just hold just a tad bit up. Bring it on down here. Bringing it on down. Looking down the runway. Down the runway. Is everything clear? Am I good? Everything looks great. Gonna kill my auto throttle now. Letting myself come on in. Looking where I am in my center line. Am I coming in at touchdown points? Yes, I am. Start that flare at the 20. Start that flare. Make sure you've killed that throttle, okay? Bringing it on down. Bringing it on down. Don't want to touch. I'm doing a long one here, but look at that. Butter landing right on the center line. Yes, it's a little bit long because I didn't bring that throttle back in time, okay? Cut the throttle to the threshold. Don't be afraid to cut that throttle threshold, all right? I let it go out a little bit too long, which you saw, which I talked about, the speed thing. Too much speed, you're going to hit a long landing, okay? Don't be afraid of the landing, okay? You're just, all you're doing is you're kissing the ground, guys. That's all you're doing. Use a good flare. Maintain that flare. Don't try to get to the ground quickly as possible. You do that, you're going to hit hard, okay? But if you hit, 200, 300 feet per minute, guess what? That's still a good landing. Airliners do that all the time, and sometimes intentionally. Don't be afraid of that either, okay? So guys, this basically just kind of going over how I hit a good landing in general, right? So I was a little bit long on this one, and that was a throttle issue. I killed the auto throttle, but I didn't bring my throttle back all the way. And that was a mistake on my end, which led to a little bit of a long landing. But even when that happened, you know what I didn't do? I didn't freak out. I didn't, start trying to like, oh my gosh, I got to get down right now. Calm. You got to remain calm, okay? You had plenty of runway left. Plenty of runway left. So that's basically how I do my landings. It starts with a good briefing beforehand, knowing your route, knowing your landing, your approaches, knowing your aircraft, knowing the runway you're trying to touch down on, and being able to fly the aircraft. Don't rely on your autopilot. Your autopilot will fail at some point. Don't be afraid of flying the aircraft yourself. Learn manually. Learn to take off manually. Learn to fly. I encourage you to do an entire flight manually. Don't use autopilot at all. Not at all. Program the FMC, yeah, use your flight directors, but do it all manually. Everything manually, including the cruise. I know it sounds crazy, but yes, you can do it. They used to do it all the time, and you can do it too. So anyway, guys, I hope this has helped. If you have any questions, of course, leave it in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time up in the sky.